Today, I want to walk you through the main ideas in How to Read a Book by Mortimer Adler and Charles Van Doren. This isn't a book about speed reading or tricks for finishing more pages. It's a guide to reading with intention. The authors argue that reading is one of the most valuable tools we have for learning, thinking, and growing. But most of us treat books the same way, whether they're novels, textbooks, philosophy, or history. Adler's message is simple. Different books demand different approaches, and if you learn how to read them properly, you get far more value out of the time you invest. The book breaks reading into stages. It explains how to approach any text, how to understand an author's ideas, how to question and evaluate those ideas, and how to compare multiple books on a single subject. By the end, reading becomes a conversation rather than a one-way transfer of information. Let's go step by step through the core principles. 1. The 4 levels of reading. Adler organizes reading into 4 layers. Each level builds on the one before it. Most people stop at level 1 or 2 without even realizing there's more. Level 1. Elementary reading. This is the foundation, the basic ability to read words and sentences. It's what we learn in school. Adler includes it to show that reading in the deeper sense is not automatic. Elementary reading is about decoding symbols. The higher levels are about making meaning. You can be perfectly literate and still not read well at the analytical or syntopical level. Level 2. Inspectional reading. Inspectional reading means getting the most out of a book in a limited amount of time. It's not mindless skimming. It's a deliberate preview. When you use this method, you do things like read the title page and preface, scan the table of contents, flip through chapters to see how the book is organized, read the first and last paragraphs of major sections, look for summaries or conclusions. This gives you a sense of the author's structure, their main questions, and whether the book is worth deeper study. For example, imagine you're choosing between 3 books on history. Instead of committing blindly, you spend 20 minutes with each one. By the end, you know which book speaks to you and which one fits your purpose. That's inspectional reading. Level 3. Analytical reading. This is slow, careful, intentional reading. It's what you do when your goal is deep understanding. Analytical reading has clear rules, which we'll explore more in a moment. The focus is on answering questions like, what is the book really about? What problem is the author trying to solve? What are the key ideas? How does the author build their argument? You break the book into parts, identify key terms, follow the logic, and connect everything back to the main purpose. This level helps you understand a book as well as the author would want you to. Level 4. Syntopical reading. This is the highest and most demanding level. Syntopical reading means reading several books on the same topic, comparing their arguments, and forming your own independent conclusions. You're not just absorbing what each author says, you're putting authors into conversation with each other. For example, if you're studying the topic of justice, you might read Plato, Aristotle, modern political philosophers, and contemporary legal thinkers. You look for the ways they agree, the ways they differ, and the assumptions they share or reject. This level turns you into an active thinker, not just a reader. 2. Key rules and techniques for analytical reading. Adler offers a practical system for reading any complex book. These rules help you build clarity and avoid misunderstanding. Rule 1. Classify the book. Ask yourself, is this a practical book? A theoretical one? A scientific text? A work of philosophy? A history book? A piece of literature? The type of book changes the way you interpret it. A scientific book needs evidence. A philosophical book needs logic. A novel needs imagination. Knowing what kind of book you're reading sets your expectations. Rule 2. State what the book is about. At this stage, summarize the book in a few sentences, not by copying the introduction, but in your own words. If you can't explain a book simply, you don't truly understand it. Rule 3. Identify the structure. Break it down. What are its major parts? How does each part support the main idea? How do the pieces build toward the conclusion? This keeps you from getting lost in details. You see how each chapter serves the whole. Rule 4. Understand the key terms. Every author uses important words. Sometimes they use them in special ways. If you misunderstand these terms, you misunderstand the argument. For example, if a philosopher uses the word reason, do they mean logic, emotion, purpose? Understanding their vocabulary is crucial. Rule 5. Identify propositions and arguments. Propositions are statements the author claims are true. Arguments are the reasoning that supports those claims. Your job is to trace how the author moves from one idea to another. This reveals the logic and the hidden assumptions. Rule 6. Spot the assumptions. Authors always make assumptions, some explicit, others hidden. Notice them. They form the foundation of the argument. For example, an economic book might assume that people always act rationally. If you question that assumption, the whole argument looks different. Number 3. How to ask the right questions while reading. Adler says every thoughtful reader asks 4 universal questions. What is this book about as a whole? What is the author saying in detail? Is the author right or wrong? What does this mean for me or for the world? These questions keep you active instead of passive. They turn reading into a conversation rather than a lecture. For instance, when you read a book on productivity, you don't just accept everything. You ask whether the author's suggestions match real life. You consider how the principles apply to your own work. Number 4. How to evaluate and criticize a book fairly. Adler is clear on one point. You cannot judge a book until you understand it fully. Many disagreements come from misunderstanding, not real conflict. He offers simple guidelines. Understand before you judge. Repeat the author's argument in your own words. Make sure you represent it fairly. Avoid emotional reactions. Don't reject a book because you don't like the tone or because it challenges your beliefs. Focus on the logic. Give reasons for disagreement. If you think the author is wrong, explain why. Point to faulty logic, missing evidence, or questionable assumptions. Don't criticize the author for not writing a different book. Judge the book on what it tries to do, not what you wish it did. If someone writes a book on economics, don't criticize them for not covering psychology. Stay within the author's purpose. Good criticism shows respect for both the book and your own thinking. Number 5. How different genres should be read. One of Adler's most practical contributions is showing how different types of books need different approaches. Reading practical books. These books teach you how to do something. For example, a fitness, coding, or personal finance. Here, you evaluate whether the advice is useful and realistic. Ask, what problem is the author solving? Does the solution make sense for you? What would it look like to apply it? Reading history. History books combine facts, interpretation, and storytelling. Dates matter, but they're not the whole picture. Look for cause and effect and understand the author's perspective. What sources do they use? What assumptions are built into their narrative? Reading science. Science requires careful attention to definitions, evidence, and reasoning. You have to watch how the author builds theories from data. Understand what is established fact and what is hypothesis. Reading philosophy. Philosophical texts demand slow reading. Break down the argument, follow definitions closely, and pay attention to logic. Philosophy often deals with abstract ideas, so clarity is essential. Reading social sciences. These books rely on frameworks and assumptions about human behavior. Question those assumptions and think about how well they match reality. Reading literature. Novels, poetry, and drama require a different mindset. Don't analyze too early. Experience the story first.
Let yourself feel the character's struggles. Afterward, reflect on the themes and ideas. Literature teaches through emotion and imagination, not argument. Number 6. The importance of syntopical reading. Syntopical reading means studying a subject through multiple books rather than relying on a single author. It's the most powerful way to deepen your understanding of any field. Here's the process. Step 1. Define your questions. Choose a topic or problem you want to explore. Something like, what makes a good life? Or, how do societies grow? Or, what is consciousness? Step 2. Gather books from many perspectives. Pick authors who disagree. Contrasting opinions are valuable. Step 3. Compare their answers. Look for common ground, differences, and contradictions. Step 4. Form your own view. After studying multiple perspectives, create your own understanding. This method turns you from a consumer of ideas into a creator of them. It builds independent thinking and helps you form nuanced, balanced conclusions. Number 7. Conclusion. Reading as lifelong learning. Adler's final message is that reading is a skill you can develop for your entire life. The more consciously you read, the more you learn. These techniques help you get more value from every book, no matter the subject. Inspectional reading saves time and guides your choices. Analytical reading gives you depth and clarity. Syntopical reading gives you mastery. When you apply these levels, reading becomes more than a habit. It becomes a way of thinking. It sharpens your judgment, improves your focus, and helps you grow in any field you care about. Adler sees reading as one of the strongest tools for personal development. It's a lifelong conversation between you and the world's best thinkers. And the better you get at it, the more those conversations enrich your life. If you enjoyed this breakdown, subscribe to Audiobook Insights for more clear and practical book summaries every week.